I watched my father from afar, seated at the back of our small house with his hands under his jaw, thinking the weather was hot that afternoon, and it wouldn't be healthy for one to stay under it. He was lost in his thoughts and didn't notice when some children greeted him and passed by as they played along. What could be the problem again, I thought to myself, feeling exhausted from hawking bags of pure water since morning. I hated seeing my father this way, moody, sad, and lost in thoughts. He became this way ever since he lost his job and was unable to get another one due to the bad recommendations from his elder brothers who hated him for no just reason. I sighed softly as I walked slowly toward him, counting my steps because I was weak, tired, and hungry. I got closer to him and noticed a drop of tears dropping from his eyes. I quickly rushed to him and wiped the tears before they dropped. "Papa, what are you doing? Why do you do this to us? You promised never to drop a tear for any reason, and here you are breaking your promise," I said with a shaky voice and a heavy heart as I wiped his face with the little piece of cloth I carried around when hawking my pure water. My father looked at me and smiled. I could see the sadness and pain in his eyes even as he tried to hide them. He held my hand in his, and I could feel his hand shaking. I looked at him with concern and noticed that the lines at the corner of his eyes had become more visible. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out as I was choked with emotions. My heart was in pain at the realization of what was happening to my father. "Benny, you're back. How was your sale?" he asked, hiding his pain. "It was okay, Papa," I managed to say in a low voice. "Papa, have you eaten? I bought a plate of rice and beans this morning from Mama Eno, and I left it on the table for you to eat when you wake up. Did you see it?" I asked, feeling my emotions coming out. "I saw it, Benny, but I'm not hungry yet. I'll eat it later," my father said and turned the other way looking at nothing. "But Papa, you need to eat something. Your hands are shaking, and it's making me worried," I said, trying to hold back the tears that were already welling up in my eyes. "Please Papa, let's go in so that you can eat your food." "Where's Benjamin?" he asked suddenly, still looking at nothing. I scratched the side of my head as I didn't know what to say. I heard his voice again asking me of my twin brother. "Where is Benjamin?" He sounded soft but firm. "Papa, he said he's coming," I stuttered and looked away. My father gave a slight chuckle and shook his head. "I know he has gone to play again. I just hope he doesn't come back with another injury," he said and gave a heavy sigh. "Papa, don't worry about him, he'll be fine. I've already collected the money he made from today's sale before I came back," I explained. "Let's go in so that you can eat your food. Moreover, you sitting under the sun, which is not healthy for you. Please stand up, let's go inside," I urged my father and held one of his arms, trying to lift him from his seat. My father looked me in the eyes and couldn't argue even though he wanted to. He stood up, and we walked into the house. I quickly dragged the wooden table close to the only chair we had, which was already worn out, and gestured for my father to sit, which he did reluctantly and relaxed his back. "Papa, please eat your food," I said as I dragged the plate of food closer to him and went to bring drinking water. "Benny, I'm not hungry. I wanted you and Benjamin to eat this food when you return. Please, keep it and wait for your brother's return," my father said while still relaxing on the chair. I looked at the plate of food on the table, and immediately my stomach made a loud noise. I was hungry and had not eaten since morning. My brother and I used the last money in the house to buy this food for our father because he was on medication and would need to eat. My father looked at me with a raised brow and a wide smile as if to say, "I heard that," and I immediately felt embarrassed. "I knew that you and Benjamin hadn't eaten anything since morning, so I decided to leave the food for you guys to eat," my father said and closed his eyes as he relaxed more on the chair. "But you're on medication and need to eat. Else, how would you take your drugs? Moreover, we aren't kids anymore. We can take care of ourselves," Benjamin said as he walked into the house with his shirt on his shoulder looking all sweaty. "Papa, please sit up and eat your food. Benny and I ate puff puff earlier. We will get something for all of us to eat later when we go out for the evening sales," Benjamin said and took the food from the table and placed it in our father's hands. He looked at me, his twin sister, and winked. We sat down and watched as our father struggled to eat his food. My brother tried his best to make our father eat more, but he said he was done after eating a few spoons. "I'm not a glutton like you," my father teased, and we all laughed. But underneath our laughter was suffering, pain, and sorrow. I kept quiet and watched with a faint smile as my father and brother laughed, and then my mind drifted to when our mother was still alive. 4 years ago, my father and mother were financially buoyant. My mother had a mini supermarket while my father was the financial secretary general in a very big organization. He was well known and respected amongst friends and family. Our parents made sure we never lacked. My brother and I had all we wanted and needed, and also attended one of the best schools in the country. One faithful day, his 4 elder brothers came to our house on a visit. They were all doing very well in their various businesses because my father always supported them financially. But that day, I remember I felt somewhat uncomfortable. I could tell there was something fishy about them at that moment. I told my mother, who was busy preparing something for her in-laws, but she ignored me and said I was just being childish. An hour later, we heard noises in the living room and rushed down to check what was happening, only to see my dad's elder brothers raining insults at him. "What's happening, my in-laws?" my mother inquired as she held my father, who was still sitting by his hand. "Shut up, who asked you to speak when we're talking?" the eldest barked at my mom. "Don't talk to my wife in such a manner, I won't tolerate that from anyone." My father charged at his elder brothers for the first time since they started raining insults on him, and all H3LL went loose. "Oh, I see, so now you don't have respect for us anymore because you feel you have money more than us. Don't worry," my father's immediate elder brother said and snapped his fingers at my father. "Victor, you dare to raise your voice at our eldest brother because of this woman, an outsider, I see. Don't worry, now we understand what is happening here," the second eldest said, looking at my mother with sharp eyes like that of a dagger. "Victor, today you have crossed the line and we shall see," the eldest said finally and stormed out of the house while the rest followed after snapping their fingers at my parents. We were all surprised at what was happening. No one expected such an argument or misunderstanding between my father and his brothers because they had always got along. My mother, knowing her husband too well, quietly stood up from his side and walked gently to the door. She opened it and saw my uncle driving out of our compound with speed. She shut the door and came back to my father, who was already shaking his right leg as a sign of anger. My mother gently placed a hand on my father's shoulder and the other one on his chest and whispered sweet words of praise in his ears. Within seconds, my brother and I were surprised at the effects of what my mother did because my father's face brightened up immediately. He even smiled brightly. "Mummy, what did you say to Daddy to make him smile within seconds? He has forgotten that he was angry just a few seconds ago," I said with my eyes popping out and baffled at the transformation. My mother laughed gently while still holding my father and said to me, "Well, I know the man I'm married to. I simply reminded him of who he is and added some of my secret ingredients to it. That's my secret." "Wow, Daddy, you're a very lucky man, and I hope to be as lucky as you when I grow up," Benjamin said, and we all laughed and settled down in the living room. "Benny, please get me a glass of water," my father said, and I quickly went to get it. After he had drunk the water I gave him, he sighed and relaxed more on the cushion. "Honey, what happened between you and your brothers? What's the problem?" my mother asked, feeling concerned, while my brother and I kept quiet to hear what my father had to say. The living room became too quiet all of a sudden as we waited for my father's response. He took his time as if he was weighing his thoughts before he finally said something. "Dear, do you remember the last time I gave my brother money?" he asked my mom and paused for her reply. "Yes, that was 3 weeks ago. I remember you gave each of them 5 million to add to their businesses," my mother responded confidently. "Good," my father said, nodding his head and sitting up properly on the cushion. "Do you know that they used the money and came back to ask for another one? They want me to reimburse them 5 million naira each again," my father said with a loud voice, and we could feel the anger in his voice. "What?" my mother exclaimed. "What do they take you for? An access-free vault where they can come and collect any amount of money they want at any time? No, 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 this must stop. What is it?" Exactly, that was the exact words I used that got them angry. I told them I don't own a vault where they can get free money whenever they want. Imagine, do they think I plug money from the trees in my compound, 5 million for each of them, making it 20 million? For what? My father said angrily and started ranting. My mother allowed him to rant and vent his anger, and when he was done, she walked up to him and sat on the hand of the cushion. "Honey, it's okay to get angry with your brothers because they mismanaged the money you gave to them, but please see if there's something you can do about their demand. Even if it's 3 million you give to each of them, it's better than nothing, my mom pleaded with my dad.
I've heard you.
I'll call them tomorrow when they're calm, but for now, I just want to eat. I'm so hungry, he said, and we all stood up and went to the dining to have our lunch. The next day, which was a weekend, my father called his brothers severally, but none of them answered his calls. He sent messages but got no replies. How do I give them the check since no one is answering my call? I'll just leave it for now till they call back, my father said to my mom, dropped his phone beside him on the cushion, took the newspaper our security man brought, and started going through it. Almost an hour later, my father's phone rang. He took it and saw that it was his immediate elder brother who was calling. He picked up the call and immediately apologized for the previous day. Keep your apology to yourself, Victor. We don't need your money anymore, and let me tell you, soon you'll understand what it means to beg for money or food to eat. I promise you, his brother cursed and hung up. God forbid, I reject it in Jesus' name. It is not our portion and will never be, my mother fired back. Whoever wishes us back will wallow in wickedness and shame, and no weapon formed against us shall prosper. My father was dumbfounded at what his brother said to him. He couldn't believe they took it that far as to lay curses on him and his household. My father was still lost in thought and didn't know when my mother started praying till she ended the prayer. Honey, don't worry, they can't do anything to you. God knows you've tried your best to take care of them and their families, my mother said. What did I do wrong? How can my brothers say such things to me, the same people I've been helping for years? My father said, sounding so hurt and pained. He took his phone and dialed his eldest brother's number only to discover that he had been blocked. He dialed the rest of his brother's lines, including the one that called him, and found out that they had all blocked his number from reaching them. My father laughed out loud and stood up from the cushion. Oh, so it has come to this. Wow, no problem, he said and walked out of the living room, leaving my mother and Benjamin behind. 2 weeks later, my father was summoned by his organization at the headquarters, and that was when our misery began. He lost his job and was asked to pay millions of naira for what he knew nothing about. My family went broke immediately because we sold all we had to pay for what was demanded. As if that was not enough, my mother's supermarket, which was our only means of survival, caught fire in the middle of the night, and everything we had, all our hopes, got burnt in the fire before help could come. My mother couldn't bear the loss and kept thinking until she developed high blood pressure, which eventually led to her early demise. We had no choice but to sell the remaining property we had, including our house, so we could give my mother a befitting burial and also pay for our West Africa Examination Council examination. With all these happening, none of my father's relatives showed up, even during my mother's burial. It was just a few of my father's friends and former colleagues who came to sympathize with us, and that was the last time we saw them. Benny, Benny, I heard my name echoing from a distance. Benny, what is wrong with you? I heard my brother asking. You drifted off again. I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were calling me, I said and wiped the tears from my eyes with the piece of cloth I was holding. It's time, let's go and hawk the remaining bags of water, my brother said and walked out of the house. I stood up to follow him and turned to look at my dad. He was already sleeping soundly after taking his medicine. Don't worry, Papa, we will bring you out of this pit, I promise, I said and walked out of the house determined. When I got out of the house, I went to the backyard where we keep our bags of pure water and saw my brother with a bowl and 2 spoons. I stood and watched as he brought out a transparent nylon containing yellow Gary from his pocket and poured it in the bowl. My stomach growled and at the sight reminding me of its emptiness. You better close your mouth before fly settles there, my brother teased as he opened a sachet of pure water and poured it into the bowl containing the Gary. What are you still doing standing there? You better come fast, else I'll finish it. Oh, he said to me again, and before I knew it, I found myself drinking the Gary like it was a competition. Benjamin drank a little and left the rest for me. He rested his back on the wall of our house, which wasn't plastered yet, and watched as I drank the Gary. I'm sorry I lied to Papa that we ate puff puff this morning. I just didn't want him to worry about us, Benjamin said. He never liked lying for any reason and always felt bad when he did. It's okay, Benjamin, I completely understand, and more so, it was for his good, I said and gulped down the remaining liquid from the bowl and sighed, rubbing my stomach. Thanks for this delicious meal, bro, I enjoyed it. He looked at me and gave a sad smile. You're welcome, at least a cup of Gary is better than 2 tiny puff puffs, he said, and we both busted into laughter. Benny, I know things are hard and we are facing too many difficulties, but please try not to cry about the past, especially in front of Papa. You know how it is with him, it might worsen his condition. My brother pleaded with me and I immediately felt guilty for making him worried. I'm sorry, Benjamin. I was overwhelmed with my emotions. I couldn't control it, especially whenever I looked at Papa and remembered how things were for us before now. I just couldn't help the tears that escaped my ears, I said calmly, hoping my brother would understand. It's all right, Benny. I understand how you feel. It's just that I don't like seeing you that way. Don't worry, things will get better again. Just give it time, he said and stood up from the bench we both sat on. I watched as my brother took the bags of pure water and carefully arranged them in our transparent buckets, making sure that mine was smaller than his. I stood up when I saw that he was done and went to where he was to carry my bucket. He helped place it on my head and instructed me to wait for him to wear his shirt. Let go and get an ice block from Benga. He promised to give me one for free today, he said after wearing his shirt, and we left. A few hours later we were still on the road selling our pure water when all of a sudden I felt a sharp pain in my stomach. I stopped moving and placed my hand on my stomach where it hurt, trying to suppress the pain, and for a moment it stopped. I heaved a sigh of relief and continued hawking, shouting the usual "Buy your cold healthy pure water," when I heard someone called from behind. Pure water. I turned and started running towards the lady that called because I didn't want anyone to get to her before me, but before I could get to her, the pain I felt earlier came back again, but this time in double folds. I held my stomach and screamed because the pain had become unbearable. Benjamin heard my scream and ran as fast as he could, while the lady who called for pure water rushed down to hold me before I touched the ground. Before I knew it, my sight became blurry, and the last thing I saw was my twin brother running towards me, shouting my name with fear written all over his face. Benny, Benny. My brother called, severally shaking my body to wake me up because I had already passed out. Help, please, someone help me, Benjamin cried out, looking around for who would help. The lady who wanted to buy pure water from me quickly opened one of the pure water I was carrying and sprinkled some on my face using her hand. Don't worry, she will wake up any moment from now, the lady said. Let's take her to that shade over there, she said, pointing at a small kiosk made with zinc and planks. Benjamin nodded his head and lifted me from the ground while the lady helped carry our buckets of pure water. They rushed me to the kiosk. Benjamin sat on the bare ground and rested my head on his tight. He took the cover of his bucket and started fanning me with it while the lady stood and watched. Within minutes, a few people had already gathered, wondering what had happened to me. What happened to her? What happened to your sister? They kept asking. Benjamin was already feeling tense seeing that I wasn't waking up. He kept on fanning me, ignoring everyone's questions and stares. Slowly, I began to gain consciousness. I opened my eyes slowly and called out for my brother, but he didn't hear me, and I couldn't even hear my voice. What's happening to me? I thought, and became scared instantly. I closed my eyes and said a little prayer, then with force, I called out his name again. Benjamin. It was loud enough for everyone to hear. My brother looked at me with his eyes already very red from crying, and I could still see the fear I had seen earlier before I passed out. Benny, you're awake, oh thank God, he said and held me in a tight hug which I reciprocated. Thank God she's awake. Please take her to the hospital to check what's wrong with her. Who knows, it could be something serious, someone said from among the onlookers. Benjamin ignored him and made me stand up with him. Let's go, he said and held my hand. Your buckets, the lady who had wanted pure water said and handed our buckets to my brother. Here, she put her hand in her pocket and brought out some money. Add this to whatever you have and take her to the hospital. I'm so sorry about what happened to your sister, she said and handed the money to Benjamin. Please take care of yourself, and then she left. Already, the onlookers had all gone. It was just my brother and I that was there. I looked at my brother, who was still surprised at the lady's kindness. Benjamin, please let's go home, I said weakly, relaxing on him. Yes, let's go, he stuttered, still looking at the direction the lady took while leaving. A few minutes later we were standing in front of a chemist's shop. What are we doing here? I asked my brother. We are here to dance skelewoo in a willow style, he replied, trying to cheer me up, which worked as I smiled even as I held my stomach in pain. We walked in and sat on the bench inside the chemist shop and greeted the owner. "Ejima, what do you people want?" The chemist asked with his eyes fixed on me. "Sir, my sister is having serious pain in her stomach. It was so bad she fainted earlier," my brother explained with a sad expression. The chemist looked at me and asked me to lie down on a small bed on the floor. I was skeptical about it and looked at my brother for approval, which he did by nodding his head. I lay down on the bed gently, still feeling the pain and facing the tattered ceiling. It was so uncomfortable, but I had to bear it. The chemist did some checkups on me by touching some places on my stomach and then asked me to stand up. "My dear, you have chronic ulcer," he said nonchalantly. "What? Ulcer?" My brother and I shouted at the same time, unsure of what we heard. Watch out for part 2. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories. I honestly have you covered. Thanks for your time.